Welcome, everyone, to AURI Connects Webinar Wednesday, part of AURI Connects monthly online series featuring updates on the work that AURI is doing to foster long-term economic benefit for Minnesota through value-added agricultural products. I'm Dan Scogan, your host on Webinar Wednesdays. The AURI Connects program is hosted by the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute in Minnesota, with sponsorship from Bremer Bank, and by the Main Street businesses focused on food and agriculture, the MBFFA initiative. Through a collaborative approach to small business recovery and resiliency, MBFFA is reducing barriers to access for entrepreneurs that are seeking customized consulting and training services. You can learn more about their network of experts ready to help you get connected, drive solutions, and grow your business venture at the link that's provided on the screen. They are funded in part through a grant with the U.S. Small Business Administration. This program aims to actively engage all participants in the food and ag industry to improve competitiveness of producers, businesses, and entrepreneurs through ongoing purposeful connection of resources and partners along the value chain, and increased knowledge of opportunities, technologies, and trends. Remember, this event is being recorded and archived and can be found at auri.org. Remember that you will be muted during our presentations, but you can send us your written questions through the Q&A portal on your screen. Now, back in September, we began a series devoted to the latest developments, initiatives, and challenges in the Upper Midwest's thriving sustainable proteins industry. Today is the final part of that series, as we discuss what's happening in the plant and alternative protein space. And joining us today will be Carl Graydon, Head of Product and Process Development at Apparel. He's been working in the protein ingredient business for 11 years. Previously, as part of a team that developed a novel process to extract and purify protein from brewer's grains. As a co-founder of Apparel, a company focused on creating protein and other food ingredients from underutilized plant feedstocks, he has developed a process for extracting and isolating sunflower protein fractions. Maximilian Jouy is the Impact Governance Manager for Insect. With an engineering background, Maximilian joined Insect 2 years ago. He has the mission to internalize the ability to measure environmental impact and make use of it to have a better decision throughout the company. Insect is pioneering the alternative foods industry to make the world a safer, healthier place that respects the planet's boundaries. Also joining us today, Lindsay Loken. Growing up on a farm surrounded by cattle and horses and a vet tech mom, Lindsay Loken has animal instincts in her blood. After years as a paramedic in the wilds of Wyoming and Montana, she was feeling burnt out of emergency medicine when her dad called her up one day and said, "Hey, the meat locker across the street is for sale." You can fast forward a decade, and Blondie's Butcher Shop stands proudly as a testament to Lindsay's passion and dedication. Also joining us today is Hunter Miller. He is Northern Pride CEO, who brings over 20 years of extensive protein industry leadership, from having held some key roles for companies such as Pilgrim's Pride and Freshwater Farms. As the cooperative continues its long-standing tradition in turkey production, Miller's leadership is poised to contribute significantly to its growth and its success. And the discussion today will be led by Jason Robinson. Jason, in his role as the Business Development Director for Food for the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute, works with food clients to develop their businesses to further the value-added development of Minnesota's agricultural products. I want to welcome all our panelists today, and Jason, I'll let you get us started. Welcome to Webinar Wednesday.
It's great to be a part of this month's Webinar Wednesday, and I will kick it off this afternoon. I guess we are afternoon. This afternoon by just briefly recapping what it is that we heard in last month's webinar. In September's webinar, when Dan mentioned we kicked off the first in our series around protein sustainability. So as Dan mentioned, today we are going to hear from 4 private protein companies on how they're navigating sustainability challenges in their business. In September's webinar, when we kicked off this series, we shared an overview of the sustainability landscape, initiatives, and challenges across the spectrum of protein products. So what did we learn during that webinar? Well, first, we learned, and it's probably no surprise, that protein demand is growing, with expected consumption outpacing population growth by anywhere from 2 to 4 times. This is in large part due to the growing global population. Emissions are a pain point, with protein production alone accounting for more than 20% of global emissions, estimated by 2035. And we also talked about how innovation in protein should happen here in Minnesota, given our state's historical position as an agri-food epicenter and protein producer, both in the traditional animal world as well as in the alternative protein world. And finally, we learned that balancing consumer and customer expectations, along with the economic, supply chain, and sustainability communication challenges, continue to be massive pain points in the protein industry. Today, this protein industry is really bifurcated into two segments: traditional animal protein, which includes our traditional sources such as meat, dairy, and eggs, and the alternative sector, typically focusing on plant or microbiologically derived, or a combination of both. So let's recap the sustainability challenges and advancements in both segments. So in the animal protein space, it's clearly apparent that many commodity organizations are actively working towards producing more sustainable animal proteins to put into the marketplace. A few examples include the beef industry, where between 1961 and 2018, the industry has reduced emissions on a per pound of beef produced basis by more than 40%, while also increasing the yield of 60% more per animal. They've done this while focusing on three specific aspects of sustainability: environmental, economic sustainability, which is really focused on producer profitability, and social sustainability, which is really focused on enhancing the public's trust in the cattle producer as a responsible steward of their animals and the land they raise those animals on. In the pork industry, over the past 6 decades, pork producers have improved their sustainability metrics by using 75% less land, 25% less water, 7% less energy, and 8% fewer carbon emissions, according to the pork industry's trademarked We Care ethical principles. And in the dairy industry is using an approach of targeting farmer incentives that encourage climate-friendly investments and practices that will aid the entire industry in its goal of net zero emissions by the year 2050. Let's transition over to talk alternative proteins for just a minute. The alternative protein sector, which is really consisting of plant-derived, fermentation-derived, insect-derived, and cellular-based sources of protein, is much less mature from an overall human consumer market and supply chain points of view, and has only recently, let's say in the last couple of decades, really begun to make some inroads into the marketplace as a viable alternative to animal protein. Clearly, we saw this as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. And this has been led in large part by the lower resource usage and environmental impact associated with producing non-animal proteins. The data today really suggests that alternative proteins, generally speaking, have lower overall emissions intensity than traditional animal proteins, but only account for about 2% of the total protein market. One of the key challenges that is bubbling up in the industry is actually around public perception, as we have seen sales in the plant-based foods market in particular drop precipitously since the 2020 high water mark. And that perception is really driven around this concept of the word alternative in the alternative protein segment title. This word alternative really implies a secondary or less than ideal marketplace option that doesn't really allow these products and ingredients to stand on their own merits. Now, like I mentioned, this is a public perception issue with the use of the word alternative, it's not necessarily true in the marketplace today. So today, we're going to hear from the 4 organizations that Dan already introduced that play directly in either the traditional, animal, or alternative protein spaces, with the goal of understanding how the private sector is navigating sustainability and other headwinds in their respective sectors and in their respective businesses. So to kick it off, I will ask each organization to give us a brief intro to their business and their value proposition. So to start, we're going to go over to Carl Greeden from Apero. Carl, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Jason, Dan, and the rest of the AURI team for hosting this discussion. I'm really excited to talk about how Apero is kind of meeting the sustainability challenge in the alt protein space. At Apero, our mission is more from less. And what that means, or how we put that into practice, is by finding underutilized crops, agricultural feedstocks that we can upcycle into useful ingredients, primarily being protein. And what underutilized means to us is crops that have been used for really just a single purpose. And by upcycling them, we feel we can really bake sustainability into our model. We're providing more plant protein from crops that are already being produced. And how we did that first was working with brewers' grains. Brewers' grains are what's left over after the brewer has processed barley and other adjuncts into beer. And they're typically a waste product or a low-value feed with quite a high protein content still there. So we developed a process to extract soluble protein from that, and we partnered with Anheuser-Busch to commercialize that technology. They've been now producing and selling that protein for the last couple of years. And now we've set our sights on sunflower seeds. Sunflower seeds, other than what you buy in stores just to snack on, are primarily used for their oil content. And they're pressed at high heat with holes around and further have their oil extracted with hexane. And so what's left over is this really low value sunflower meal feed or waste product that still has a good nutritional profile there, but is really tough to turn into any useful ingredients. And we wanted to rethink that and how we can get all of the nutritional components out of there. And what that's resulted in is us developing a process to make sunflower oil or cold pressed sunflower oil that has a higher nutritional content than the seeds that are pressed at high heat. We've also isolated 2 protein isolates, a soluble and an insoluble, a protein concentrate that also has a high fiber content, and a nutraceutical. And the unique and really fun thing about the way we've isolated the proteins is that since we haven't altered them in any way, their natural properties get to be expressed when used in products. And the one I'll highlight is that our soluble protein is naturally sweet. Not because there's sugar present, it's just the protein that's sweet. And what that means in practice is that when it's used in consumer products, no further sweetener or sugar needs to be added, resulting in a healthier consumer product. Now that we've developed that process, we are working to commercialize it and raising the funds to build a facility that would process tens of thousands of acres worth of sunflower seeds. And I will note that in the first webinar in this series, it was highlighted that Minnesota is 3rd in the country in sunflower production, right behind the 2 Dakotas. And so we're really looking at doing something here in the upper Midwest to do that. But as we kind of complete the commercialization of sunflower seeds, we'll look to expand this technology to other underutilized feedstocks like hemp, canola, and palm kernel. So that's kind of where I'll leave it for now, but looking forward to the rest of the discussion.
Fantastic. Thank you, Carl. That was a great summary. Next, we're going to head all the way to France to hear from Maximilien Jouy, who is joining us today a little later than noon here in Minnesota. So Maximilien, we'd love to hear from you a little bit more about Insect. Thanks so much.
Yeah, hello everybody. I'm Maximilien from Insect. Insect is a French company that was founded 12 years ago. And its goal is to raise insects. So for us, we are using a Tenebrio molitor. So the larvae is called the mealworm most of the time. And we feed them agricultural byproduct, mainly wheat bran and rapeseed or sunflower meal also, and to make sustainable protein. We got three production facility, two in France, a small one and a big one that is just starting right now. And we also got a small production facility in Nebraska. Why do we use this mealworm? Because of its ability to separate the fiber from the protein in wheat bran and other agricultural byproduct, and having a really low FCR using those byproducts, lower than 2. We can achieve an FCR lower than 2. And so that means that with only a few resources that are byproduct, we can make a really high quality protein. Our protein flour can achieve a 70% of protein, for example, when a common protein will only achieve 60 or 65%, for example, poultry meal or stuff like that. We are a B2B company. We only do ingredients, and we let our customer make the final good. So the final good can be either feed for aquaculture, for example, or for pet food. We sell a lot in pet food, or a food product for direct human consumption, like making burger or other thing with our protein. And as a co-benefit of this protein, we also sell the frass, so the dejection of the insect, as a fertilizer and as a biostimulant also. And yeah, I think I finished here. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Maximilian. We're looking forward to hearing more from you on your business as we go along throughout the discussion. Next up is Lindsay Loken of Blondie's Butcher Shop. Lindsay, I'll let you take it away and tell us more about what you've been up to.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me and AURI for doing this. This is going to be an incredible conversation, even though I think I could listen to Maximilian the entire hour on what he's doing over in France. That's pretty fascinating. Like I said, my name's Lindsay. I own Blondie's Butcher Shop. I'm a custom exempt slaughter plant in southeastern Minnesota. I'm on the smaller scale slaughter plants for the state of Minnesota. I process probably between 10 to 15 beef and hogs per week. So I primarily work for the farmer in allowing them to sell their animals to the consumer directly, in halves, quarters, wholes, etc. They cannot take my product to a farmer's market or sell it online. We're not a USDA or a federally inspected plant by any means. We are state inspected. So our goals being smaller when it comes down to efficiency and environmental protectiveness decisions, we're pretty a high functioning plant in that matter. All of our product, as far as bones, blood, internals, goes back to animal byproduct. If not, mostly of our internals go into dog food, Tuffy's dog food in Green Bay. Our blood is used, boiled down for feed byproduct in other species. As far as our hides, right now, our top quality ones are being utilized and shipped to leather goods for boots. Some of our hides go up to Twin Cities Hide and then return down to Red Wing Shoe for some of their famous Irish setter boots. Otherwise, I think some just get incinerated, get burned. As far as fat, that is boiled down and utilized in feed byproduct as well. All of our cardboard's recycled. We use high pressure hoses to control water supply and minimalize that for cleanups, carcass cleanup before they go into the cooler. We're just starting out in e-commerce. We're kind of a direct to consumer, so I don't have a lot of middleman handling our meat byproducts. So I really don't have a lot of really needing to control those types of things. We are now just tipping our toe into e-commerce and the shipping factors, which I think we're going to have to get a little more creative on boxing and things like that on our control. But yeah, as far as sustainability goals, we're always looking for the next innovative thing and, whatever we can do to continue that practice. So.
Great. Thanks, Lindsay. That's a wonderful description of the business and frankly, how interesting it is to hear how you're utilizing the entire animal as much as possible. I'm excited to hear more about what you're doing there. And finally, we'll talk to Hunter Miller, who's the CEO of Northern Pride. Hunter, take it away.
Jason, and thanks to AURI for hosting this webinar. A little bit of background about Northern Pride. We're a cooperative made up about 20 growers. We process around 5 million live birds a year through our facility. We are a commercial inspected operation, and we're what I call a brand within your brand. We do have a private label, but most of our products are branded under known retailers throughout the United States. So you probably consumed one of our birds and it may have been labeled a different brand, but it's more than likely if you've had one on your table, it could have come from Northern Pride for the past 35 years. We are facing sustainability problems, not only at Northern Pride, but in this industry with CO2 emissions and water consumption. And we're looking to see what we can do as a company and the industry to gain back on the environmental justice throughout this industry for meat processing. We do have some sustainability goals within our company, and we're looking to improve those as we continue our career path here at Northern Pride. That's all I have, Jason. Back to you.
Thanks, Hunter. And since you had mentioned your sustainability goals, we can kick right into the first part of our discussion, which is, as an organization, can you elaborate a little bit more on your sustainability goals? In particular, do you have them? What are they? And frankly, how does your corporate decision-making process factor in sustainability impact? And how, if possible? So if you started off, Hunter, since you were just speaking about them, if you could kick us off with just describing your goals and how your corporate decision-making factors in those goals.
Right. So I'll give an example of one of our sustainability goals, and that's water usage. So each live bird that comes through the plant, we have a calculation on how we can figure the gallons per bird that it takes to process that bird from when it arrives to the plant till it's put in for finished goods. And we look at different technologies, reuse water, use less water to process the birds through our operation, but there are constraints on meeting customer requirements and regulations on the amount of water we use. So it's quite complicated, but it's one of the biggest impacts we have on the environment, and this industry in particular in the past 15 years has devoted a lot of time and monies into working on ways that we can process birds with less water. So that's one of the things that's on our minds daily here. All of our staff are aware of it, and we discuss this, if not daily, weekly for sure, in our top management meetings. And we're always implementing new ideas to reduce the amount of water we're using. For example, just our location, which is relatively small, industry speaking, we consume about 60 million gallons of water a year that has to be processed and put back into the usable water field.
That's quite a large usage of water.
Yes.
And do you get pushback from the state on how much water you're using, or are there specific goals that you have in that conversation with your state counterparts?
Well, currently there's not, but in the future, we know there will be. It's just tightening, demands from the EPA and the local governance as well. So we're trying to do our part to reduce that water usage. We know it's coming, and the industry does as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Hunter. Carl, why don't we hear a little bit from you as it relates to corporate sustainability goals and what you can share about them and how those factor into your corporate decision making?
Yeah, our corporate sustainability goals are really focused on getting plant proteins out to the market. And that's how we view it here, because we think that the business model we've set up is kind of embodies sustainability, so that every pound of plant protein that we can produce, especially from upcycled feedstocks, is a major benefit. But beyond that, when we're looking for sites to place these facilities, we take into account the electric grid and the mix of renewables that's on there. Additionally, we really try to locate this as close as possible to the processing or the supply. So that would mean putting it, right in the middle of those tens of thousands of acres of sunflower fields, ideally, right? That's not always possible, but we want to reduce the shipping as much as we can. And then with the design of the facility itself, we focus as much as we can on reducing its energy usage and water consumption and water recycle. So that's a major focus as we go through the facility and process design with these products.
Carl, you had mentioned earlier that one of your primary sources of feedstock actually comes from sunflower press cake that has had hexane that has been subjected to hexane extraction. Do you see that as a complication for meeting any of your sustainability goals, knowing that there's obviously a public perception issue again with hexane extraction and the use of solvents?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's maybe why I should have been a little more clear on that. Is we've rethought the process all the way back to the beginning, and so we will actually be pressing the sunflower seeds themselves and then not using hexane, so that it doesn't touch those organic solvents and doesn't have that negative perception around dealing with any of that. So we've actually taken over the entire sunflower seed processing from beginning to end.
Does that mean a new stream of revenue for Apero in terms of sunflower oil?
Right. So it means the oil, the proteins, the protein concentrate, the nutraceutical that I mentioned. So all of those would be wrapped up into it, including dehulling the seeds as well on the front end.
Wonderful. Thank you, Carl. Maximilian, would you be willing to share with us about Insect's corporate sustainability goals? What are they and how those factor into your corporate decision making?
Yes, so in Insect, we are doing our own life cycle analysis to have a good overview of our footprint and on how we can improve it. And then with those LCA, we are also able to assess whether in a new market with a new product, are we really making benefit or not? If our customer is using our product instead of the most commonly used product, is it really better for the environment? And so this is really a priority for us, is to focus on market where we can prove that we have benefit. We can provide benefits for the environment for our customer. Also, we still have a footprint, and to manage it, so we are doing this LCA, and also we have a little tool to transform our business plan into carbon emission. And so then we can plan the investment needed to achieve our carbon emission reduction goal by 2030. And so while our business plan evolve with new product and with a new market, then this tool evolve and we can follow those goals. Also, we have the one of our main goal is to get rid of fossil fuel usage on site until 2030 for the heat production mainly. And well, basically we follow three main indicators that are carbon footprint, water usage, and land usage, mainly for the feedstock of the mealworm.
Wonderful. Thank you, Maximilian. As you were speaking, I was thinking through some of what you were saying, and you talked about creating an LCA or a life cycle analysis that you can use to effectively quantify your impact. How do you intend to communicate the results in an effective way to your customer or consumer so that you can really showcase the impact of your business model and what you're doing? Communication is such a challenging part of sustainability, and gathering those metrics is one thing, but being able to effectively communicate them is another thing entirely.
I'd say it depends on the market. On some of the market, our customers are really mature on the topic, and so the communication is really easy because they just tell us, yes, I want this metric put in this way. I want it peer review or not, and then I said the dialogue with mature customer is really easy, and then they are the one doing the communication to the final consumer. When the market is not mature enough, then we are making some publication. So our LCA are being peer reviewed to have more credibility and to be able to communicate to the public.
Will you make that full LCA available to the public, or just selected highlights as you use them for communication?
It depends on what we are talking about. Obviously, if you have the full LCA public, then you basically are transparent on your cost structure. So it's but the result will be obviously public.
That's a wonderful point. Thank you for highlighting that, because clearly that is a challenge in communicating sustainability without giving away the farm, so to speak, to your competitors or to or to the public. Thank you, Maximilian. Lindsay, as a small business, how do these sustainability goals that you have talked about kind of factor into your decision making, and how do you think that those impact your relationships with customers and consumers, particularly as you embark upon an e-commerce business?
Yeah, and I think everybody on this panel can attest to that. Our consumers are so Google educated right now that sometimes it's hard to get them to step back and have a conversation about what really is the truth, and what direction is best to go, and what we're trying to purvey to the customers themselves, especially since 2020 has hit. The consumer has really fled to know the story of where their protein's coming from, despite what protein it is. So they've become very sought after and gone to educate themselves. So they come in with numerous preconceived notions, and we've really seen the direct market, whether it's the hog, the cattle, the turkey, or the chicken sector, really expand to people wanting that straight from the farm protein. And there's always that conversation that the protein is healthy and clean in the United States, despite where it comes from and what protein it is, because we have such strict sectors. But that conversation is a hot topic right now in the direct market. So tapping into the e-commerce for us smaller processors is really interesting factors. It's extremely expensive to ship frozen meat that's been produced and procured locally, but people are willing to pay for it. They think they're doing an environmentally thing better. The stewardship of the animals coming locally The protein hasn't been transported to numerous places through multiple middlemen. Not that that makes it healthy or better or worse. It's just more sustainable in their eyes and leaves a lesser footprint. So I think that conversation is still to be had with shipping and e-commerce of meats. If, you know, at some levels, I think it's better to purchase from your local area versus me shipping to Arizona. But right now it's all about the consumer demand, and that's where we're finding it.
Wonderful. Can you tell us a little bit, Lindsay, about how, you know, you alluded to this concept of your consumers being so much more educated, and I 100% agree with that, with access to the information that's available on the internet. But with that comes, you know, a framework of having to deal with information that may or may not be accurate.
Correct.
And so how do you as a small scale business kind of deal with some of those inaccuracies that may come as a result of consumer educating themselves?
Yeah, it's a lot of unpaid for time is what it comes down to. Really, I start with my farmers and the people that they're selling to. I try to get my farmers to really start that conversation between themselves, and I will definitely step in and help when need be. If this is a consumer coming to me directly looking to connect with a local farmer, you know, we have the conversation right away. You know, whether that's if they want a grass-fed animal versus a corn-fed animal, you know, we have to have the conversation that that grass-fed animal has to exist longer on this planet to be raised versus the grass-fed or the corn-finished animal. So that leaves a bigger footprint too. So a lot of those interested conversations have to happen to get that consumer to just understand. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. And it is what it is at the end of the day, but we do our best to have that conversation. And I think that's relatable to everybody on the panel. You kind of move forward the best you can and educate with what you have, and people are going to attune to what they want to attune to, I've learned.
Sure. And how have these questions from your consumers impacted the decisions you've made in how you structured the business, how you do business, how you source, kind of any of those corporate decisions? How have those questions influenced you, if at all?
Yeah, that's a really good question. You know, everything in my business, from my retail sector to the slaughter, is really directed around what the consumer wants. Whether that's sourcing the animal through what style protein and how they want this animal raised, through whether it's through feeding or stewardship or the amount of footprint the animal had left on the planet, all the way up to sustainability, and what they want, and what they think, you know. And I always kind of leave it up to the consumer to say, you know, I will provide you with whatever you want, but you need to tell me what's best for your family. I can give you the facts, but ultimately it comes down to, how do you want to care for you and your family? So we purchase as much local as possible. I happen to be in a very dense commodity area, unlike a lot of other butcher shops around the United States. You know, we have turkey growers, we have chicken growers, we have hog farmers that are turkey growers. You know, sometimes they're multi-commodity farmers. So I have access to purchase a lot more local than a lot of other places do, where they'll have to ship in. You know, my butcher shop friends in Arizona, you know, they don't have the commodities that we have up here. So that sourcing for me is a lot more maintainable in the local sector than other areas. So
that's great. Thank you. Hunter, I actually am interested in hearing something similar from you too, about how, you know, knowing that you're a major producer, how do you deal with some of the impact that you might hear from customers or consumers, and what impact does that have on business decisions that you've made?
Sure. You know, we here at Northern Pride, we package different classifications of turkey, all the way from, you know, what we call conventional raised, no antibiotics ever, and organic, and all that's the voice of the customer. That's what they want, and that's changed drastically probably in the past 10 to 15 years here at Northern Pride, from, majority of products being conventional to now we're seeing more interest in the organic. And as Lindsay mentioned, the customer's willing to pay for that in most cases. And they're very concerned with animal husbandry and animal welfare. And, we're even seeing more interest in free range of the different varieties too. People want to know that the bird had a good life and that it was not in a poultry house that entire time. So that's becoming more and more important to the consumer as they become self-educated. A lot of the consumers still don't understand what the claims mean. They just have a perception that it's better for them health-wise, which can be the case, and sometimes no. It's just a different way to raise the animal. I'm not going to say one way is better than another. It's different. And whatever the end consumer perceives as better to them is what we try to do and what we represent with the different brands we have.
Wonderful. Thank you. I think I'd like to move on away from this this conversation on sustainability just a little bit, but a little bit, maybe it's a little bit more of a philosophical question. That being, if you take a step back from your company's goals around sustainability, how do you think the protein that you work with will contribute to feeding the growing global population? And then conversely, how do you think it should contribute to feeding the population, particularly given the sustainability goals that we see? Maximilian, do you mind kicking off the conversation there?
Yeah, no problem. I think right now our main market is pet food, and I think it's in a short term it will be the biggest one. Here we are not directly feeding the world population, I'd say, but in pet food there's a lot of ingredients, high quality ingredient for the premium pet food could be used in the human food market. And so having the mealworm available on this market can put back those good part of the animal back to the human market. So in a indirect way, we are still providing protein in the global protein market, and in such a way we are feeding the world population. One of our goal is to push more the direct human consumption market, because here it's where we have the most positive impact, and it's really our final goal. I'd say that the main challenge here is consumer acceptability. It's here, and also a bit legislation, but this will take some time. It's achievable, but I think with the growth of consumer acceptability, we will be able to pierce in this market and really to have a better contribution to feeding the world.
Great, thank you, Maximilian. That is you answered my follow-up question right away around the global challenges that you experience with more widespread adoption. So Carl, I'll turn it over to you. Same question. How do you think that your protein will contribute to feeding the growing global population? And then ultimately, what do you see as the biggest challenges with your particular avenue towards more adoption?
Yeah, for the will side of that question, or how they will be consumed, right now the reality is that a lot of protein isolates are consumed as a part of high protein shakes, high protein bars. For people that are just either looking to get a bit more protein in their diet because they're health conscious and think that adding more protein in their diet is better for them, or they're athletes, weekend athletes that want to have a protein boost after a workout. And that's great, but what that is lacking there is a wider adoption into the marketplace. And so how we'd like we'd like to see it or how it should feed is being adopted into, a part of some of your daily meals, right? Whether that's high protein cereals, right? Puff cereals, protein crisps, or something that can be added to your plate at dinner time. Texturized proteins that are rehydrated and become part of your rice and beans, or those types of avenues. On the challenge side, we've started to say around the office here that tasting is believing of our products. We think pretty highly of our products, and it's not just that we're delusional. When people taste it, they really like it. So we don't see a challenge in adoption. It's more about a challenge of getting it into products themselves. Having those consumer product companies be really innovative in how they use these different plant-based proteins, including ours. So that's what we see kind of as the biggest challenge in getting more global adoption here. Our consumers are becoming more aware of labeling that is really focused, like non-GMO, upcycled, certified, which we've just done with our proteins, and that type of awareness is increasing and it is helpful. But you still have to get it into the products themselves.
Got it. Thanks, Carl. For Lindsay and Hunter, I'd like to ask a similar question, but I think we understand, generally speaking, how animal protein works to feed the growing global population. So if you have any comments on how it will continue to feed the population, or how it should contribute to feeding the population, feel free. But I think I'd like to ask you to focus on what you see as some of the biggest challenges with even more widespread adoption of animal protein as you look out into the future. Lindsay, if we can start with you there, that'd be great.
All right. I think first and foremost, we really need to protect our farmers. We've got a lot of small farmers coming back into the sector, which they have really disappeared over the last 15 years for sure. We need more small processors. Minnesota's done a great job since 2020. I think we kind of got gobsmacked and realized how short we were on local processors. And to be completely honest, the art of butchery has really declined in the sector up until these last couple of years. And I think we're hurting now more because people are realizing how valuable they really are to have on Main Street now. Protein diets are a hot topic right now, and I don't foresee that going by the wayside anytime soon. We've talked about uptick in direct marketing of local meats. Cottage food people are really starting to come and grow up a little bit more. Exports of our meat, Korea and Japan are two huge ones right now, looking for American beef protein and pork proteins. So I think it's not something that's going to go by the wayside. And what was the last percentage I heard? We're at 2.8 million, or 2.8% of our population is feeding the world right now. So that's kind of gobsmacking in a way, to know that we're at that minimalistic number right now. So hopefully we see an uptick of some of those small farms kicking back up and finding a niche specialty market for themselves.
Great, thank you. Hunter, what do you see as some of the biggest global challenges associated with more widespread adoption of turkey as a primary protein source?
Well, I don't know if it's global, but I'm speaking to the United States.
Sure.
From the farmer aspect that Lindsay spoke about, it's a problem with commercial growers as well. It's a difficult job. It's highly competitive, and the margins sometimes just aren't there for the farmers. And they go to other row crop farming. It's a lot less, risk and less work as well. They're highly mechanized now. The equipment keeps getting larger and larger, so it doesn't require a lot of labor to do that. Where in poultry, you're the complete opposite. You're heavily rely on labor, skilled labor, and in these houses that are knowing when to feed the birds and address different issues in the houses. So it's quite difficult to manage, and you see more and more people getting out just because of those challenges. Globally, I don't think you'll see us going away anytime soon. It may shift production of where it's produced, but poultry's still the #1 consumed protein in the world and the cheapest. So we'll be around. It just depends, where we get our poultry in the United States, maybe South America or other regions that can do it cheaper than us. I hope that's not the case, but those are things that I see facing us in the future.
Wonderful. Thank you, Hunter. And thank you to everyone on the panel for offering your opinions and your thoughts as it relates to the challenges that your companies are seeing with sustainability and ongoing protein production. I think, Dan, we are approaching the top of the hour, so we want to make sure that we leave some time for any of our attendee questions. So I'll turn it back over to you for that session.
All right, Jason, thank you very much. And thank you to panelists. You're telling a great story. And I'm going to circle back to you with some questions that I've been thinking about, but let's pick up the ones that our participants have thrown into the Q&A portal. If you have a question, you can certainly put it there. I know, Hunter, you answered this one on your own, but I'm going to ask it anyway, because a lot of times when there's somebody with a question, others are having the same thoughts. Do you use water to cool your carcasses at your plant? And if so, is there an environmental benefit to air chilling?
Yes, Dan, we do use water to chill our birds here at Northern Pride. Most of the industry does. There are several producers that are switching to air chill. It has maybe some benefits as far as water consumption, but there's higher energy usage and use of volatile chemicals that wouldn't be impacted with the bird, but more ammonia that we would have to have on site. So there's advantages and disadvantages of the system. Environmentally, we're still looking at our specialists in the industry to tell us what the impact is versus the two. Sure, the air chilling would resolve the water issue, but we don't know environmentally with the increased usage of ammonia for the cooling towers, how that plays out.
Question for you, Carl. If you're dehulling the feedstock seed completely versus the current practice, how will you sustainably deal with the hulls?
Yeah, great question. A couple different ways. One is we are looking at reducing our CO2 footprint for the facility by having a biomass boiler on site to fulfill some of our, or really all of our heat needs. Along with that, the other way that we're looking at is other outlets for it, whether that be animal bedding or use as pellets into wood-fired pellets.
Max, how much does the feedstock for your insect farms affect the LCA?
It depends on what you are looking at. If you're looking at the carbon footprint, it will be from 50% to 70% of the footprint of the final good. If you look at water or land usage, it's more than 90% of the final good water footprint or land use footprint. And
I was curious if you are creating enough protein to be disruptive in the alternative protein market yet.
How much we are producing right now?
Yeah.
What is right now? We have only 2 plants functioning with a bit more. I'd say I don't want to say maybe 1,000 tons of protein each year, but the big plant that is that just started, its goal is to produce 40,000 tons of larvae every year.
This is an open question, whoever wants to take it. I noticed Embold, I hope all of you are aware of Embold, has a priority on agricultural practices that advance soil health and water stewardship. How does the work of the panel fit into that priority of protecting the water and the soil?
Dan, maybe I'll just start here quickly to level set around Embold, because I'm not sure our panelists are fully aware of that organization. Embold is an organization made up of leaders of some of the world's foremost food and ag companies, research institutions, and nonprofit orgs based here in Minnesota. with a goal of testing and executing solutions to the biggest challenges in our food system. So members in the coalition include big companies like General Mills and Cargill, Target as a retailer, Schwann's company, McKinsey, and various other organizations. And I think the important thing to take away here is that one of the primary goals of the MBOLD coalition is advancing soil health and water stewardship practices. So I think the question is around, how do your individual organizations potentially explore supporting some of those, supporting soil health goals, not specific goals, but just generally speaking, soil health. We heard a little bit about water stewardship already, but maybe if anybody can comment on what how their organizations work might be contributing to this idea of improving our soil health in the United States and potentially globally.
Anybody want to weigh in on that?
I can start actually in regards to soil health and sunflower plants. You know, we've been talking to researchers that are on that the agricultural, the seed side of it. And one thing that sunflower plants do really well is a deep root system, which from a grower perspective makes them drought resistant, right? But from a soil health perspective, what they're seeing as well is that those deep root systems allow a better transfer, both I'll say up and down in the vertical soil layer of both nutrients and minerals. And that can balance out some of those same things that they're seeing with shallower root system crops. And so I won't say that all of those transfers are good and bad. It just helps balance it out. So if you're seeing more minerals come up to the surface with shallower system crops, the deeper root system crops actually allow the water to bring some of those minerals back down, positively contributing to soil health for those minerals that you don't want to accumulate in the topsoil. So that's kind of one of the things that we're seeing with sunflowers plants.
So we have a product labeling question here. So anybody who wants to weigh in on this one, and maybe Jason, you start here too, but for product labeling, what types of regulations are there around the different types of labeling? This participant says they've started to see more sustainability-based claims like carbon neutral on food products. Is someone verifying those labeling claims? What confidence can the consumer have that these labeling claims are accurate?
I'm happy to kick off a short conversation on this, knowing that we're running up against time. Labeling is a challenge, and I think I'd start there, because what we're starting to see, really since the USDA organic seal came into regular practice 20 plus years ago, we've actually started to see a proliferation of certifiable claims that brands can make on their packages. And I think it's important to note that some of those claims are certified by an external third party. Others are simply statements made by a brand that tend to try and cater to their target marketplace. In some respects, it almost starts to look like a Boy Scouts or a Girl Scouts sash full of all of the accomplishments that particular brand has made, in which case many of those claims can start to lose meaning for the end consumer because there's simply too much to absorb. And when a brand claims to be doing everything, are they really doing anything? So to specifically focus on the question around certification of those labels, that is one of the biggest challenges in the marketplace, because some of those labels, some of those what we call in the marketplace are bugs on a label, on a package. Some are backed up by a third-party assessment that validates that a particular brand is actually meeting the criteria set forth by a label. Others simply look like like a label that is backed up by an external third party that actually does an audit to make sure that the rules are being followed. In some respects, it's incumbent upon the consumer to do their own work to really validate that that information is valid. And now, as the question asks, we're seeing a proliferation of statements around carbon neutral, net zero emissions, whatever it is, you may think about it, but the reality is that there aren't that many organizations that are actually monitoring those statements. And I could be wrong, so please jump in here if anyone has any evidence to the contrary. But there is a concern in the marketplace around this idea of greenwashing, which is trying to showcase what your brand is doing in order to meet sustainability goals or metrics that may or may not be wholly accurate or actually relevant to the products being sold. Hunter and Lindsay, I'm sure you've experienced some of those challenges with labeling and certifiable labeling in the animal markets. I don't know if you have any comments on the idea of labeling and validation.
Yep. Oh, they look like they
As you
both
said.
Oh, fired. I bet Hunter could pull his hair out this time of year. False labels.
Yeah, I like the thought of the greenwashing, and that's becoming more and more of an issue with some of the customers we deal with. It seems like they come up with a new third party symbol they want on their product every year, and I'm like you, the consumers, overwhelmed with all these different things, and honestly, are they going to take the time to research each one of them and understand what they mean? And it's another cost for our producers, our farmers, because they have to go through these third-party audits so we can validate these claims. And it's just more cost added, and the consumer's paying for it in the end, whether they know or not.
I'm going to keep everybody. Lindsay, did you want to add anything to that, or?
The only thing I would add to Hunter's comments, he hit the nail on the head, would be that, a lot of these claims are great, but a sustainability to feed the mass population can't be maintained at some of these levels, That's why we are in animal production where we are at, to keep that footprint as low as possible while producing mass amounts of meat to feed the world. So
It's been a great conversation, and I think I could keep you another half hour here, but I am going to ask to go once more around the table, and then we'll wrap things up. I wanted to ask if sustainability was in the eye of the beholder, but I'm going to leave that one alone. And I was going to ask about storytelling and how important it is to continue to tell your story, but I'm going to leave that one alone. I'm going to ask you each to think about where you are in 5 years. Lindsay, we've got you on the screen. Where are you in 5 years?
Oh, that's a good question. Hopefully we see technology continually advancing to find more adaptive methods to leave a lesser footprint, especially in the animal protein worlds that I proudly represent. And that we find just better practices consistently.
Maximilian, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
In 5 years, I hope we could build several other vertical plants dedicated to human consumption, direct human consumption, and yeah, I think that's where I hope we will be.
Hunter, will I have a Thanksgiving turkey in 5 years? Let's hope so. It's sort of as Lindsay stated, the sustainability is becoming a big issue, and with all the goals that are put in place, I see a bright future for the protein industry taking grasp of these challenges and running. And as I mentioned earlier, there's lots of monies that have been devoted not only by Northern Pride, but the industry in a whole, that we're going to peck away at these sustainability goals, if you will, and be a better producer in 5 years. And Carl, what do your news releases look like in 5 years?
Yeah, in 5 years, we hope to be saying that, plant number 3, facility number 3 to be producing sunflower protein is going on, and that we plan to start deploying technologies to process, hemp protein and canola protein and other proteins down the road too. That's really where we want to be in 5 years.
And Jason, you brought a great group together for this conversation, I think, and I would just like to hear from you today what you've heard that you can use to help the next generation of food entrepreneurs get ready.
Well, I think what I've heard today is really focused on making sure that what you're doing is actually relevant to not only your consumer, but to your customer, and that you back up what you say you're doing with real tangible evidence that showcases you're not just talking about doing something, but rather you're living the values that you have defined as a company in order to meet your mission, whether that mission is around saving the world and improving climate change, or selling local livestock, selling local foods. Say what you're going to do and do what you're going to say.
Well, that concludes the AURI Connects Webinar Wednesday for today. I do want to thank Jason Robinson, Hunter Miller, Lindsay Loken, Maximilian Zui, and Carl Graydon for joining us today with a great conversation. AURI Connects Webinar Wednesday is presented by the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute of Minnesota. AURI's mission is to foster long-term economic benefit for Minnesota through value-added agricultural products and processes. And we are interested in your feedback, so please respond when we send out our event evaluations. Remember, for more information on today's program or any of the work that AURI is involved with, you can go to auri.org. Now, with the holidays right around the corner, AURI Connects Webinar Wednesday will take a break until January. January 10th, please join us for the first in a two-part series on Minnesota's food infrastructure. Watch for more information coming out soon. And you can always learn more about other work that AURI is involved with by going online at auri.org. Again, we're looking forward to having you join us again January 10th for another AURI Connects Webinar Wednesday.